1:30, 1:22 is your time. You are on Iconic with myself, Dollar Mac Hallo, back hanging out with the Bomokot, of course, in the hour, as we always get in touch with our regional content to get to find out what is happening in other countries. A story we've been following very closely, Tebogo, is the story, the illegal immigrants from Trump land that were recently sent to Eswatini, and some people saying these are guys that have really done some horrible crimes.
And the White House did reveal that particular detail of these criminals. They're the ones who came out to actually just emphasize how dangerous this
And by the way, these are not even people from Eswatini, by the way. These are people from different parts of the world. I know Jamaica was one of them. Well, Steps?
We had Laos, Yemen, and what else? Yeah, those are the ones that I can remember off of the top of my head. But I think it's 5 countries, and it has been Vietnam as well, I believe. And I believe also a detail was there to say some of these countries said we want nothing to do with these guys at all. We
have someone on the ground in Swaziland. And Eswatini, that's how old school I am. Like, I'll go Swaziland.
Yeah, you know, it's allowed. I think we're also still really just adjusting. But we're joined by the absolutely fantastic Melusi Simelane. He's a civic rights activist, and Melusi is a passionate and visionary human rights activist who works at the forefront of advancing, of course, civil and political rights in Africa. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Marketing from the University of Eswatini and is an alumnus of the prestigious Obama Foundation Scholars Program at Columbia University in New York, USA.
In Colombia. Oh, okay, I thought it was Colombia. Anyway.
Yeah, in Colombia. So the U.S. State Department also selected him to participate in the International Visitors Leadership Program in 2017, where he gained valuable insights and connections to further his advocacy work. Melusi joins us now to speak to us, of course, about the fury that has erupted over the arrival of foreign deportees from the United States. Melusi, I would like to welcome you to Iconic.
Good afternoon, Melusi.
I can hear you fine.
I love it.
Fantastic. Okay, fine. If you're just joining us, like Dolomek said, Melusi is the civil rights activist with SALC, or the South African Litigation Centre, which promotes and advances human rights and the rule of law in Southern Africa, primarily through strategic litigation and capacity strengthening support to lawyers and grassroots organizations. Now, Melusi, just before we were interrupted by the connection there, we had jumped on to the first question of our conversation, which of course speaks to what is the central concern that civil society organizations have with the recent transfer of 5 individuals from the United States to Eswatini. I know that threats of taking legal action have surfaced, but you could please just lay the foundation for us.
Well, thanks again, Dola, and thanks, Tebogo. Our neighbors, our fellow Beleswa patriots. Look, the problem that we have here is around, number one, the capacity of our correctional services, our prisons infrastructure. You remember that these are people who are said to be criminals, who are said to have been brought here to serve time, while our government is arguing that they're in transit to go serve their time back at home. But where they are stored right now, according to the Prime Minister's briefing on Friday, they are stored in our Matapa Correctional Services facility, which is our maximum prison. And we've got a problem because just recently, the government has said to us, well, the Human Rights Commission working with the UNDP, they've said to us, we're over 120% over capacity in our prisons. So now how does this tally? We need to do the math. We need to be realistic. So as civil society, we cannot sit down and fold our arms when, number one, we know that the country is already in breach of the Mandela Rules. The Mandela Rules are the United Nations minimum standards of the treatment of prisoners. This means that you need to make sure that your prisoners are in a facility that can accommodate them, but also over and above the infrastructure, you've got resources that these people are being taken care of, because just because you're a prisoner does not mean that you are devoid of dignity and humanity. So I think fundamentally this is our problem, that number one, where was the open fairness? Where is the transparency? Where was the legislative consultation to make sure that these people that are being brought into Swaziland, there is a consensus on the government side, both the executive and the legislature, to say these are the people that we are bringing into this country for this reason, and this is how they are going to be accommodated, and this is how the taxpayer is going to be funding the taking care of these people.
Now, from a legal standoff, tell us, does Eswatini have the authority, though, to detain foreign nationals who have no ties to the country?
I think this is what then brings in our concern, which is why we are actually currently considering going to court. In fact, I would say we are almost at that point where we will go to court to challenge the government for this deal, whatever this deal is, because to this moment, we still haven't seen a copy of this agreement. Because number one, we've got the Correctional Services Act, which speaks to how people are brought into prisons. And then we've got, of course, the Convicted Offenders Act, which deals with an exchange of prisoners. However, the reason why everything is a bit murky now is because these two pieces of legislation did not anticipate a situation where you've got third country citizens being brought into Swaziland. Because let's look at the Convicted Offenders Act, for instance. It looks at offenders who are of Swazi nation and they have broken the laws in Botswana and are serving time. Then we can talk to Botswana to bring the prisoners to Swaziland to serve their time there. Mind you, that also needs to happen with the consensus and consent of that said prisoner, and vice versa. If a Botswana is in Swaziland and breaks the law, Botswana can request to have their prisoners go serve that time at home. Also, again, the consensus and consent of that particular prisoner. So now you've got third country people who are brought into Swaziland, which brings in for us the issue of our immigration laws, because we've got an Immigration Act which speaks to prohibited immigrants. And for us, as far as the United States has said, these are convicted criminals of heinous crimes. According to our immigration laws, these are people that should be deemed as prohibited to enter the country. However, the minister does have the power to allow them entry. So we are trying to seek clarity as to, did the Minister of Home Affairs allow them entry, and for how long are they going to be in Swaziland, and where are they going? Because you will remember, the US has said that their home countries do not want them.
Very, very interesting indeed, Melusi. Now, speaking to acts, can you explain whether the Correctional Services Act and the Transfer of Convicted Offenders Act allow for this kind of detention of non-citizens? Let's also speak to extradition between the US and Eswatini. Could there be some loopholes there?
I do not even foresee a situation where it was an issue of extradition, because remember, even if it's an extradition, it must be guided by existing statute. And we have the Convicted Offenders Act, which deals with those situations where our extradition would work on our citizens who are serving time in the United States. But here we have got foreign nationals who are said to have been convicted of heinous crimes. So there is a lot of breaches that we are foreseeing on a number of statutes. One, the Immigration, the Correctional Services Act, including the Convicted Offenders Act as well. But also just maybe to highlight on the Correctional Services Act, it speaks of a number of scenarios in which a correctional service would welcome people into their facilities. Number one, it's a warrant that is signed by a court, or it lists up to 3. But those scenarios, they do not foresee people that are just going to be brought into the country and straight into the facilities without having been issued a warrant or a certificate by a legitimate court of law. So we do not even know if a magistrate court or even the High Court was approached to say, here are these people, they are said to have committed particular crimes, and therefore we are requesting you as a correctional service to house them. We do not know if that has happened at all. So you see, there is a lot of breaches in our laws as a country, and we cannot, as civil society, allow for this to go unchallenged.
Now, Melusi, what do we know about the legal process or lack thereof that led to the removal of these people from US and detention and then sent to Eswatini?
I think it would be folly of me to assume to know what exactly transpired in the United States. Suffice to say, we have all been watching the news. We've all been following the Trump administration's approach or attitude towards what they term as foreign aliens. And I think we have been following particularly that Supreme Court order that sort of paused the Boston-based federal judge's stop or pause to these deportations, because you remember that they approached the courts, citizens in the US approached the courts to say we cannot allow the Trump administration to just to deport people without granting them their rights, the habeas corpus. And then it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court sort of paused that federal judge's ruling. And I think after that, then in March, this is when we have seen the Trump administration sort of sending people, either saying they're going to send them to Rwanda or sending them to Sudan or South Sudan, something that we have seen happen. So I think it's a question of whether or not we are going to allow our region to be used as conduits for the Trump administration, because whatever happens in the United States, I believe that's a domestic issue that the Americans must deal with. But for us as the Southern African region, we shouldn't be used. In fact, as Africa, we shouldn't be used as conduits of the Trump administration or whatever sort of ill gains they are trying to achieve.
Now, if you've just joined us, we're speaking to Melusi, and Melusi is a civil rights activist, of course, with the Southern African Litigation Centre, SALC, which works in the following countries: Angola, Botswana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Eswatini, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So, Melusi, take us through the claims made by Eswatini that the individuals are in transit. What would you say you know at this stage? Legally speaking as well, what does that even mean, and does that justify indefinite detention if at all this becomes the case in the long term?
Look, I would say that the claim by the state, by the Prime Minister and his entire government, that these individuals are in transit is close to what I would characterize as a lie. Because you will remember, the entire world woke up to the news from the United States Department of Homeland Security, who said on record that these are individuals that their home countries have denied receiving them because they are so barbaric in terms of their acts that they've been convicted for. So we do not know what our government in Eswatini means when they're saying these people are in transit. In transit to what country? Because you've got the origin, which is the United States, saying to you their home countries have denied receiving them. So therefore they're going to go to Swaziland en route to where? So I think we must be able to characterize this as something close to a lie, because we do not know. And also you're right to call it an indefinite detention, because we do not know how long it's going to be. I think the IOM, the International Organization on Migration, was reached out by a particular media this weekend, and they were saying they hadn't been consulted on this issue, but they are willing to assist. So I think we are in limbo as a country, and I think also over and above that, we are in a legal limbo and a political limbo, where on the one end we're trying to advocate for an open democratic values, we're trying to advocate for consultation where the executive is always consulting the legislative arm, but then you have an executive who is constantly misleading the people. So we do not know the in transit, what it means, because we do not know where they are going.
What responsibilities does Eswatini have, though, Melusi, under domestic and international law regarding the conditions and legality of such a detention?
So as a country, of course, we are not, operating in isolation. Of course, we've ratified and signed a number of international treaties, including the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel and Inhuman Degrading Treatment or Punishment, including, of course, the African Charter, including, of course, the ICCPR. And I think I would just want to touch more fundamentally on the Mandela principles, the Mandela rules, because that speaks to the minimum standard for how you are treating your prisoners. And these people, it saddens me that we are calling them prisoners, because they have not broken a single law in Swaziland. They have not breached any statute or criminal code in Eswatini, but they're already in our prison facilities. And I think as a country, of course, we have the duty of care for people who are either here seeking asylum or for people who are here seeking refuge. But we do not have to sort of abuse the process by allowing the state to just bring in people without due process, because to this point, we do not even know if it was indeed 5 people as indicated by the American government, because we've only gotten the information from the Americans, and the Swaziland government, all they did was to say, oh yes, we received these people, oh yes, we're keeping them in our correctional services. And I think, of course, we have a duty of care to them, but we need to go step back and say, do we even have the infrastructure to make sure that these people are being taken care of? Over and above that, do we have the resources? Because we are failing. You remember the recent report from our statistics in the country that we are in overcapacity by over 120%. So where are they being kept? What facilities are being used? And what resources are being put forward to make sure that they're being taken care of?
Have you seen these people that we're talking about? Who has seen these people?
I think it's a big question that has no answer, because I do not believe a single person, one in civil society or even at our Human Rights Commission, has been granted the permission to go see these people. If we go back to our Correctional Services Act, it allows for prison visits from people like the judiciary, from people like the Human Rights Commission, from even international organizations like your Red Cross. And we are constantly in conversation with them to say, look, you need to make sure that you visit these people, because we cannot, number one, be used as conduits for American politics. But number two, we cannot continue and perpetuate the abuse, because look, we have been seeing the abuse of due process in America. We cannot allow that to then spill over to Swaziland. So that's why we're constantly talking to people like the Red Cross, for instance, to say, please do visit these prisons and make sure that we are speaking to these people so that we can find out exactly why and how they got to Swaziland, if they know. Because I think that's one question that no one is paying attention to. The question as to whether or not they were consulted about being brought in here. Because we've seen, and again, this is stuff that we're seeing on the media on the daily, where the American government is denying people their habeas rights of due process. They're just locking them up in a plane and then sending them to wherever they're sending them.
South African Litigation Centre Civic Rights leader Melusi Simelane. Now, Melusi, you talking to the organizations like the Red Cross, of course. What specific action is civil society, or are civil society actions calling on the Eswatini government and international bodies to take in this particular case?
I think the one thing that we have done as the Southern African Litigation Centre is write to the embassies and the consulates, which a lot of them are based in Pretoria. We've said to them, look, these are your nationals and they've got a right to access you. In fact, you and I, if we happen to be in any other third-party country and then we happen to be in the mix with the law, we have an automatic right to access our consular or embassy. So this is something that we've raised with these embassies based in Pretoria to say, you need to visit Swaziland, you need to demand to see your nationals who are actually being housed in our prisons facilities. And I think that's the first and foremost important point, to make sure that there's the duty of care and there's due process and they are granted their rights as individuals. You know, these are rights that are inherent to all citizens according to the UDHR Article 1. And I think the second point is for Swaziland to be open. We are a democracy, though a very dodgy one, but we are a democracy and we're under a constitution which, by the way, is celebrating 20 years this year. And therefore, we need to put it to task that we are actually ensuring that due process is followed and that democratic values and principles are not flawed, and that Parliament, even if they are overlooking civil society, but at least Parliament needs to be given a clear answer as to what has happened, what agreements were gotten into. Was there any monetary exchange that got into this, and where is that money going? Because again, we are in a situation where our prison facilities are overcrowded by over 120%. So how did we get to this point? And that's the question that we are hoping to put to the courts very soon.
And you know, we can speak to this to say with the Trump administration, we've seen unprecedented decisions or actions being taken. Now, what precedent, you know, Melusi, as an expert, would you say this case sets for future removals by other countries to Eswatini or other third countries with limited capacity and legal grounds?
I think that the big question is due process for us. I think what we want to set here is a process of is a question of, number one, due process, and also administrative processes, because you know we've gotten into a point where governments and executives are taking decisions and then they're arguing that it's their prerogative to do it. And I think just because you have a prerogative, I can make an example of what we're currently seeing in South Africa, where the president is shuffling his cabinet. And look, it's the prerogative of the president, but there are people arguing in certain quarters that, look, even if it is your prerogative, but it must be meted to the Constitution, it must be meted to existing legislation. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here in Swaziland, to say, look, Just because you are the executive, you are the prime minister, does not mean that you can just take decisions without consultation. Does not mean you can take decisions without putting into consideration whether or not there are resources put in place to make sure that they are meeting those decisions that we are taking. So we're hoping to sort of open a Pandora's box to a point where we are able to restore democratic values in the country, and we do not see a situation where the executive arm of government does things as they please, and all we have to do is sing Kumbaya.
Melusi, do you think any other countries risk, by keeping quiet, do we risk getting some more of these barbaric things that are happening from Trump world? Do you think Botswana or any other country could also receive
the region itself,
some more illegal immigrants, if I can put it that way, for lack of better words?
Look, I think that's a question for President Botha to answer, but I will say our government I will say our government has already said they are open to welcoming more, and I think that's the problem. This is why we need like-minded people who are human rights oriented, who want to promote democratic values, to join us in our fight in Eswatini, to say, look, this has happened in Swaziland, but it must stop. We must say enough, no further. We shouldn't allow it to happen anywhere else, because what is actually happening, we are being used as conduits for the politics of the Trump administration, and we shouldn't allow that.
Well, Melusi, thank you so much for always taking time and talking to us. We appreciate your input on GABZ FM. Final words to our listeners, your people, and anybody who's listening.
I'd say, look, this is a fight not just for the Southern Africa Litigation Centre. It's a fight not just for Swaziland. It's a fight for us as the SADC community to say we should not be allowed to be used as conduits for the politics of powerful nations like the United States of America. We must put the fight forward and ensure that our laws are respected, ensure that democratic principles and values are never taken for granted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melusi, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Garbook.
Thank you.
GABZ FM is committed to reporting news that is accurate, broadcast comment that is fair, and adhere to the highest standards of journalism. If you think we're not living up to this code, you can forward your complaint to the program's manager at Private Bag BO 319 Gaborone, or call us at 317-0905 or email info@gabzfm.co.bw or to the Botswana Communications Regulatory Authority, BOCRA, at Private Bag 00495 Gaborone, or call 395-7755.